The Pantheon in Rome currently holds the record for the world's largest unreinforced concrete dome, a title it hasn't relinquished in nearly 2,000 years. It's a structure that seems to defy the very laws of physics, a massive concrete bubble sitting atop a cylinder of brick and mortar, yet it survives almost perfectly intact while most of ancient Rome has crumbled into ruins. When you walk through those bronze doors, you're not just stepping into a building, you're stepping into a piece of high-precision engineering that shouldn't, by all rights, still be standing.
It's the ultimate survivor of the ancient world. Most of that survival is down to a very specific moment in 609 AD, when the Byzantine Emperor Phocas gave the building to Pope Boniface IV. By converting it into a church, now known as the Basilica of St. Mary and the Martyrs, it was protected from the usual fate of Roman monuments, which were often cannibalized for their marble and stone to build palaces for the nobility. But even before its life as a church, the Pantheon was a revolutionary statement in architecture. It represents the pinnacle of the Roman concrete revolution, where they moved away from traditional post and lintel Greek styles toward massive, soaring interior spaces.
You mentioned it being a church now, but the name Pantheon itself points back to its pagan roots. It comes from the Greek pan, meaning all, and theos, meaning gods. But there's actually a bit of a scholarly row about whether it was ever really a temple to all the gods in a literal sense. Some historians argue that Roman religion didn't really function that way. You didn't usually have one catch-all temple. They suggest it might have been more of a dynastic sanctuary for the emperor and his family, or perhaps a temple dedicated specifically to the planetary deities, which would explain the celestial symbolism of the dome.
That's a vital distinction. Cassius Dio, writing a century after it was completed, mentions that the name might just come from the fact that it looks like the heavens, and the site itself is deeply symbolic. It's built on the Campus Martius, the exact spot where legend says Romulus, the founder of Rome, ascended into the sky to become a god. So whether it was for all gods or just the imperial cult, the building was designed to feel like a miniature cosmos. When you look at the geometry, it's a perfect sphere inscribed inside a cylinder. The diameter of the rotunda is exactly 43.3 meters, which is precisely the same as the height from the floor to the top. If you could flip the dome upside down, it would sit perfectly on the floor, forming a complete ball.
It's that mathematical perfection that makes it so haunting. But there's a massive contradiction right on the front of the building. The giant inscription on the portico says, in Latin, Marcus Agrippa, son of Lucius, consul for the third time, built this. Now, Agrippa was Augustus's right-hand man in the late 1st century BC, but we know for a fact that the building we see today wasn't built by Agrippa. It was built during the reign of Hadrian in the 2nd century AD, roughly 150 years later.
It's one of history's great acts of humility, or perhaps a very clever political move. Agrippa did build the first Pantheon on that site in 27 BC, but it burned down in 80 AD. It was rebuilt by Domitian, then struck by lightning and burned down again in 110 AD. When Hadrian took over the project, he chose to keep Agrippa's original dedication, rather than putting his own name on it. This actually caused centuries of confusion. It wasn't until 1892 that archaeologists found brick stamps, actual manufacturer marks on the bricks, that proved the entire structure was built using materials from the 110s and 120s AD during the reigns of Trajan and Hadrian. Hadrian was essentially weaving himself into the legacy of the founders of the empire.
The engineering of that dome is where the real genius lies, though. We're talking about 5,000 tons of concrete hanging in mid-air without any steel reinforcement. If a modern engineer tried to do that with standard concrete today, it would likely crack and collapse under its own weight. How did the Romans manage to keep that much mass from literally imploding?
They used a technique called aggregate grading, and it's brilliant. As they built the dome upwards, they changed the recipe for the concrete to make it lighter. At the very bottom, where the walls are 6 meters thick, they used heavy basalt as the filler. As they moved up, they switched to lighter tufa, then brick, and finally, at the very top, they used pumice, volcanic rock that's so light it actually floats in water. They also thinned the dome itself as it rose, from about 6 meters at the base to just 1.2 meters at the peak. And then they added the coffers, those sunken square panels you see on the ceiling. They aren't just for decoration, they actually scoop out significant amounts of concrete, further reducing the weight of the structure.
And then there's the eye at the very top, the oculus. It's a 9-meter wide hole that's completely open to the elements. I think most people's first question is always, what happens when it rains? But the oculus isn't just a window, it's a structural necessity, isn't it? By leaving the very center of the dome open, they removed the heaviest part of the ceiling, which would have been the most likely point of failure.
Exactly. It acts as a compression ring, distributing the weight of the dome down into the massive supporting walls. And yes, it does rain inside. If you visit on a stormy day, you'll see a literal cylinder of water falling into the middle of the room. But the Romans anticipated this. The marble floor is slightly convex, curved upward in the middle, so the water runs off to the edges where there are 22 tiny drainage holes that lead into an ancient sewer system that still works today. But the real special effect of the oculus is the light. On the 21st of April, which is the traditional birthday of Rome, the sun hits the oculus at exactly the right angle at noon to illuminate the great bronze doorway. Historians believe this was a deliberate design choice so that the emperor could walk through the door bathed in a literal spotlight of celestial light, appearing divine to the crowds.
It's incredible to think of the level of planning that went into that, aligning a 5,000-ton stone structure with the sun's path for a specific day of the year. But it wasn't all just smooth sailing and perfect design. There's a theory that the portico, the front porch with those massive granite columns, was actually a bit of a botch job. If you look closely at where the porch connects to the round part of the building, the pediment is lower than it should be. There's actually a second, higher pediment outline visible on the wall behind it.
That's a fascinating bit of architectural make-do. The leading theory by scholars like Mark Wilson Jones is that the original design called for 50-foot tall columns, but for some reason, maybe the ship carrying them from Egypt sank, or the quarry couldn't produce them in time, they ended up with 40-foot columns instead. Since they couldn't change the height of the rotunda, which was already being built, they had to lower the roof of the porch to fit the shorter columns. It leaves this strange double pediment effect that looks like a mistake if you know what to look for. It's a reminder that even the greatest builders in history had to deal with supply chain issues and last-minute adjustments.
Those columns themselves are massive monoliths, single blocks of gray and pink granite. They weren't carved in Rome, they were quarried in the eastern desert of Egypt at a place called Mons Claudianus. Each one weighs about 60 tons. The logistics of getting 16 of those across the desert, down the Nile, across the Mediterranean, and up the Tiber is mind-boggling. It was a massive flex of imperial power. Only the emperor had the resources to move stone like that.
It really was a showcase of the entire empire. You have granite from Egypt, marble from Greece and North Africa, and volcanic ash from the Bay of Naples to make the concrete. It was a physical map of Roman territory. And even though much of the original bronze and gold that would have decorated the interior and the roof was stripped away, Urban VIII famously melted down the bronze ceiling of the porch to make cannons for the Castel Sant'Angelo. The core of the building remains. It's why artists like Michelangelo and Raphael were so obsessed with it. Raphael actually requested to be buried there, and his tomb is still one of the most visited spots inside.
It's the final resting place for Italian royalty, too. King Vittorio Emanuele II and Umberto I are both there. It's transformed from a symbol of Roman imperial power to a Christian basilica to a national monument. It's rare to find a building that has been in continuous use for nearly 2 millennia without ever falling into ruin. Even the bronze doors are original, or at least very close to it, dating back to the Hadrianic reconstruction.
The preservation is truly anomalous. Most of the time, when a culture changes, it destroys the monuments of the previous era. But the Pantheon was so respected, so mathematically perfect, that every subsequent generation wanted to claim it as their own. It influenced the Dome of St. Peter's, the U.S. Capitol building, and countless libraries and museums across the globe. It established the look of authority and timelessness.
There's a certain irony in that, isn't there? We see it as this symbol of permanence, yet it's a building defined by light and air, an open eye to the sky that lets the weather in. It's solid and heavy, but the interior feels completely weightless. It's a paradox of engineering that we're still trying to fully decode, even with all our modern technology.
And we might never fully decode it. We still don't know the name of the architect. Some suggest it was Apollodorus of Damascus, Trajan's famous engineer, but Hadrian was an amateur architect himself and might have had a hand in the design. Regardless of who drew the plans, they created something that has outlived their empire by 1,500 years. It remains a silent witness to the rise and fall of everything that came after it, still standing under that same open sky.
It serves as a powerful reminder that the most enduring structures are often those that find a way to adapt while maintaining a core sense of wonder.